story of Francis Heaulme is not a simple tale of a hunter and his prey. It is a sprawling, decades-long saga that unfolds across the backroads, forests, and forgotten corners of France. It is a story that forces a confrontation with a unique and terrifying form of evil, one not born of passion or greed, but of a profound and chilling emptiness. To understand Heaulme is to follow the trail of a human storm, a path of senseless destruction left by a man who drifted through life as a ghost, his passage marked only by the dead he left behind. His journey began under a curse of trauma. Born on February 12, 1949, in Sarreguemines, in the region of Moselle, Francis Heaulme's life was fractured from its very first moments. He entered the world with a severe physical malformation, craniosynostosis, a condition where the bones of his skull fused prematurely, threatening the development of his brain. His infancy and childhood were not filled with play and comfort, but with the cold, sterile fear of hospital wards and the sharp pain of repeated surgeries. These procedures, while life-saving, left him with a permanently deformed, asymmetrical skull, a visible stamp of otherness that would draw stares and taunts for the rest of his life. This physical trauma was compounded by a profound emotional wound, the abandonment by his mother. Rejected and unable to cope, she left, and Heaulme was placed in the care of his paternal grandmother. His grandmother's home was a place of stark discipline, a world devoid of warmth or affection. Here he learned that emotional needs were not merely unmet, they were irrelevant. He was fed and housed, but never cherished. This emotional aridity became the bedrock of his personality. As a schoolboy, he was a target, his strange appearance making him a magnet for bullies. He grew withdrawn, unable to connect with his peers, his responses to social situations becoming increasingly aberrant. The state soon intervened, and Heaulme was placed into a series of institutions for maladjusted youth. These were not places of healing, but of containment, crowded, impersonal systems where he learned the mechanics of survival without ever learning the language of empathy. Psychologists who observed him noted his affective deficiency, a chilling term for a human being who could understand social rules as abstract concepts, but could not feel the emotional currents that gave them meaning. By the time he reached adulthood, declared unfit for military service, the essential components of the future killer were already assembled. A rootless, emotionally void individual, carrying a deep, unarticulated rage and equipped with no compass to navigate the human world. Heaulme slipped into adulthood as a spectre. He became a permanent nomad, a phantom riding the rails and hitchhiking along the arteries of France. He had no trade, no home, no possessions beyond a small bag. His life was a continuous journey without a destination, sustained by petty theft, shoplifting, forged documents, and meagre government aid. He was a familiar, if unsettling figure, in homeless shelters and cheap bars, a tall, gaunt man with an odd, loping gait and a strangely formal, yet disconnected way of speaking. His police file began to grow, but it was a catalogue of minor offences, vagrancy, theft, fraud, that painted him as a nuisance, not a monster. The authorities saw a small-time drifter. They did not yet see the predator he was becoming. The transition from nuisance to killer was as subtle as it was brutal. The first murder that would later be definitively pinned on him occurred on November 4th, 1984, in the woods of Morieux, Brittany. Heaulme had been travelling with Jérôme Caron, a 24-year-old with a slight physical disability. They were walking together when, for a reason that would never make sense to a rational mind, Heaulme was overcome with the need to eliminate his companion. he picked up a large rock and bludgeoned Karen to death, striking him with relentless savage force. The motive, as Heaulme would later state with baffling simplicity, was that Karen was walking too slowly. It annoyed me. After the act, Heaulme did not panic or flee. He simply walked to the nearest road, hitched a ride to the next town, and continued his journey. The killing was not a crime of passion. It was an act of disposal, like discarding a piece of litter. This pattern of random explosive violence became his signature. 2 years later, on August 29, 1986, in the Lozère region, he encountered two cousins, Pascal Olive and Thierry Bosch, who were camping. Heaulme, the experienced wanderer, shared a meal and a campfire with them. They spent a seemingly normal evening together. The next morning, as Pascal prepared breakfast, something shifted in the labyrinth of Heaulme's mind. A trigger, invisible to anyone else, was pulled. He picked up a large stone and smashed Pascal's skull from behind. He then turned to Thierry, still sleeping in his tent, and killed him in the same brutal fashion. The violence was swift, absolute, and utterly without reason. Afterwards, Heaulme methodically washed the blood from his hands and face in a nearby stream, collected a few useful items from the camp, and walked away, his detachment as absolute as his violence. He did not discriminate in his victims. On July 31, 1987, in La Rochelle, he met a 21-year-old woman named Marilyn Reeves in a bar. Perhaps feeling pity for the lonely, odd man, she agreed to go for a walk with him. For reasons he could never explain, Heaulme led her to a secluded area and stabbed her 17 times in a frenzy of violence. During later interrogations, he would recall the event with chilling photographic detail, the type of knife, the colour of her dress, the weather, but the memory was entirely devoid of emotional content. It was a mere sequence of facts. Another murder, that of a Belgian tourist named André L. in August 1989, highlighted the coldly transactional nature of his acts. After killing the man with a hammer at his campsite, Heaulme robbed him of a small amount of cash, which he used to buy a train ticket, funding the next leg of his endless journey. The murder was a practical step, a means to an end. For years these crimes were isolated puzzles in separate jurisdictions. Local police investigated them as individual tragedies, unable to find a motive or a suspect because they were looking for a connection to the victim. The breakthrough would not come from a crime scene clue, but from the brilliant, obsessive mind of one man, Captain Jean-François Agrol of the Brest Gendarmerie. Agrol was a different kind of detective, an intellectual and a methodical thinker fascinated by criminal psychology. He began to notice a pattern in a series of unsolved murders across Brittany and beyond. The victims were different. Men, women, young, old, but the crimes shared a common, senseless quality: extreme violence with blunt or sharp objects, no sexual assault, no significant robbery, and, most importantly, no connection between the victim and the killer. While local police forces worked in isolation, Agrol pioneered a revolutionary approach. He began to collect files from different regional divisions, ignoring jurisdictional boundaries. His masterstroke was a large map of France. On it, using pins and strings, he plotted 2 sets of data: every known location of Francis Heaulme, based on his arrests for petty crimes, witness statements and welfare claims, and every unsolved murder that fit the profile of senseless violence. The result was a terrifying work of art, a map of terror. The pins marking Heaulme's wanderings and the pins marking the murders formed a near-perfect overlay. It was a visual proof of a national nightmare, a single thread weaving through a tapestry of death. Armed with this geographical profile, Abgrall needed a confession. He understood that Heaulme was not a criminal who would be broken by confrontation. He designed a unique interrogation strategy, a psychological masterstroke. He treated Heaulme not as a monster, but as a subject of clinical study. He spoke in a calm, neutral tone, appealing to Heaulme's intelligence and his remarkable, almost photographic, memory for facts. Abgrall avoided questions of why. Instead, he spoke the language Heaulme understood, the language of geography and time. "Do you remember being in the town of X on this date?" he would ask. It was a Tuesday, and it had rained that morning. He framed the murders as puzzles of chronology and location. This approach was the key that unlocked Heaulme. He began to confess, not out of remorse, but as a way to demonstrate his superior memory and to engage with the one person who understood his unique, detached worldview. He would describe murders with the clinical detail of a pathologist, recounting the number of blows, the type of weapon, the victim's clothing, all while expressing no more emotion than if he were reading from a train schedule. He confessed to dozens of murders, his statements a mix of verifiable facts and potential fabrications, forcing investigators to engage in the painstaking work of separating truth from the confabulations of a man who enjoyed manipulating his captors. The man revealed in these interrogations and by psychiatric evaluation was a profound enigma. He was diagnosed with a severe schizoid personality disorder, a profound disinterest in social relationships, emotional coldness, and a flat affect. But it went deeper. Heaulme seemed to possess a fundamental emotional deficiency. He understood the concept of death intellectually, but not its finality or its emotional impact on others. People were not sentient beings to him. They were objects in his environment, and sometimes they became irritants. A person walking too slowly, talking too much, or simply existing in his space at the wrong moment could trigger an elimination response. Murder, for Heaulme, was the ultimate act of detachment, a way to sever a temporary connection and continue his wanderings unencumbered. The judicial process that followed was a marathon, spanning decades. His first major trial was for the Tignières double murder in 1992, where Abgrall's geographical profiling and Heaulme's own detailed confession secured a life sentence. This was not the end, but the beginning of a long judicial circuit. For years afterwards, Heaulme was the commuting killer, transported from his prison under heavy guard to stand trial in courtrooms across France for the murders of Marilyn Rives, Jérôme Caron, André L., and others. To this day, he has been convicted of 11 murders, but he is the prime suspect in dozens more. Officially, investigators link him to over 30. Some researchers, extrapolating from his wanderings, believe the number could be far higher. Cold case detectives still periodically visit him in prison, hoping to trigger his precise memory for a specific time and place to solve a family's decades-old mystery. Francis Heaulme remains in prison, an old man now, but still considered one of France's most dangerous inmates. His legacy is a complex one. He forced French law enforcement to think nationally and collaboratively, cementing the methods of geographical profiling and data linkage pioneered by Captain Abgrall. For psychology, he stands as a textbook case of affective deficiency, a chilling challenge to our very understanding of motive and evil. And for the public, he is not a charismatic anti-hero, but a dark, unsettling spectre. He is the wanderer of death, a reminder that the most terrifying violence can come not from a cunning predator, but from an empty man, a human void, for whom life was cheap, and murder was merely a way to pass the time on an endless, meaningless journey. His story is the ultimate proof that the abyss is not just something we look into. Sometimes it walks among us.